the first stop we're heading to is where the bank robber John Dillinger was killed. And you guys know who John Dillinger is, but John Dillinger was a prolific bank robber in the 20s and 1930s. I think it was, 34 banks that he robbed? 34 banks and 4 police stations. I mean, that's pretty cool to rob a police station.
4 times.
Well, I'm not even trying that once.
Right.
He did it 4 times. But he's originally from Indiana. He's from a town just outside of Indianapolis, Indiana. That's where he grew up. A lot of his robberies were centered around the Midwestern states. He primarily worked alone, but he did also kind of work a little bit with a few other gang members. But he does get arrested a lot, especially when he's young. When he was younger, he had a harder time evading the law. He spends a good portion of the 1920s, when he's in his 20s, in prison. He goes on just a huge bank robbing spree in the early 1930s. And this was at the height of the Great Depression here in America. The stock market crashed in 1929. A lot of people in this country lost a lot of money. So a lot of those people were blaming the banks for all of their losses. So when people heard of this man, John Dillinger, and his little band robbing these banks, they actually were cheering him on at the time. He became like a Robin Hood type figure.
I suppose.
He was robbing the banks that they all hated, the banks that caused them all their problems. So they really did not want to see him caught, which made the federal authorities want to catch him even more. This was kind of a little before the FBI, but a task force was formed to try to bring John Dillinger down. He became public enemy number 1. Al Capone was public enemy number 1 first, then John Dillinger, then right after John Dillinger, another guy named Babyface Nelson was public enemy number 1. They were all Chicago guys, or here in Chicago at some point. It seemed like whenever the authorities would get a lead as to where Dillinger and the gang might be, they'd show up at that place and he either had just left, or they'd get there, there'd be like a brief shootout, and he'd get away. They really had no clue where he was. Eventually, the authorities receive a tip. They receive a tip from a lady named Anna Sage. Anna Sage was a Romanian immigrant who ran several brothels and bordellos up here in this area. You guys know what those are, right?
Yep.
Not that me and Kirk would ever freak them out. I didn't think so. For running these illegal brothels and bordellos, Anna Sage was facing extradition back to Romania. She believed she had John Dillinger living in a boarding house that she was also running with his girlfriend, Holly Hamilton. He was using a different name. He was living under the name of Jimmy Lawrence. So she tells the federal authorities that they were going to be going to a movie at the Biograph Theater, which we're going to the Biograph Theater now. July 22nd, 1934, they were going to the movies that night. They were interestingly going to see a gangster movie called Manhattan Melodrama. Anna Sage told the authorities that she was wearing this bright orange dress, which in the lighting of the night, it appeared red. She becomes known as the Lady in Red. She says she'll be there at the movie with Dillinger and his girlfriend. So agents were staked out all around the theater that night. There was a signal given when the movie ended that pretty soon everybody was going to be coming out of the theater. So that's when the agents start moving in a little bit. They don't want to tip themselves off too much, so they stay back, but they see Dillinger come out. That's when the agents start moving in. He realizes that they know who he is, and they're after him. He starts running down the alley, takes out down the street, then goes down the alley. He's shot about halfway down that alley, and that's the alley we're going to be going into in a few minutes. When they heard the big celebrity John Dillinger had been shot in the alley around the corner, everybody ran over here, and they all started pulling at his clothing, ripping apart his shirt, taking off buttons as souvenirs. Women were coming over, dipping their dress in his blood. Men were taking out handkerchiefs, dipping the handkerchiefs in his blood. The blood had spattered like all over the walls and all over the wood telephone poles. People were chipping off like parts of the
bridge head and gasket.
that had blood on it to take as souvenirs. They were taking out pocket knives, cutting out pieces of the wood from the telephone poles to take as souvenirs. So these people went crazy in just a little bit different sort of sense. Also, we know for a fact that John Dillinger had some plastic surgery done when he was hiding out here in Chicago.
It's like those
days.
We know that for a fact because a couple of months after this shooting, the guy who performed the plastic surgery, a doctor named Dr. John Probasco, was brought into Chicago's FBI building downtown for questioning. They had, I think it was up on the, I can't remember, it was like their 20th floor. It's a building that's still around today, the LaSalle Adams building.
Okay.
They were questioning him when they say he jumped out of his chair, ran toward the windows, and jumped out of the building and committed suicide.
Can I ask what you're getting at the device?
As soon as we got in, it said running.
It said running, and then it said view. It said running, ring, view, and then when we were talking about if they protect like their people after they passed, it said sure, and it said nod when you were talking about him getting plastic surgery. So yeah, nod.
Haunting.
And it just said haunting.
On the anniversary date, they probably said you didn't talk about the haunting. On the anniversary date, they do say they see a man running down.
Really?
Sometimes it appears as a blue glowing figure.
Oh wow.
And that's an obelisk.
Yeah, this is an OVILUS 5B. Yeah. That's what?
Date. Intent.
It said date, intent.
Which, by the way, that Italian grandmother is buried in Resurrection.
There was a lot that came across. I can't remember.
But this is the couch tomb. It's the only remaining visible anything above ground that we can still see with our eyes from city cemetery days. But this right here, in the winter of the year 1857, while this man was on vacation in Cuba, a wealthy businessman from here in Chicago named Ira Couch dies. The other great mystery is we have no clue if anything is inside this thing. It has not been open, at least nowhere where we can find on public record, since about the year 1901. 1901, there were some newspaper articles saying that the park opened it. They were doing some work around it. A guy who worked in the park said he went inside there, and this guy claimed he saw nothing in it when he went inside. The 50 tons is how much it weighs.
Fine.
Fine what?
There's another thing that says
Religion?
Fine religion.
Mad.
What did it say? It said mad. Garden. This is a garden.
Mad garden.
They have like bushes around.
Are we standing?
Oh no.
Sorry.
It said mad garden. I think it was mad that we were standing on.
Stand in the garden.
That's really cool.
You're standing on their garden. So again, whenever you guys are ready.
I'm in the theater district of Chicago. And this theater right up here, what is now the Nederlander, used to be a theater that had a fire that killed over 600 people. So I'm just going to take a video of that quick.
I had mentioned earlier that the Great Chicago Fire, even though it runs a 4-mile radius of the city, destroys somewhere between 17,000 and 18,000 buildings, burned for about 2.5 days, wasn't the greatest loss of life in a fire here in Chicago. The site we're going to right now was the greatest loss of life in a fire. On December 30th, 1903, over 600 people lost their life in a theater fire. And so in order to get their theater open on time, they ended up paying off all the city inspectors so they would pass this building through, even though it was not ready. And it does open just before Thanksgiving. Had been open for about 6 weeks. Things have been going fairly well. The first play that was running there was a show called Mr. Bluebeard. Now, this was a children's comedy about a man who murders his wives and hangs them on meat hooks in his closet. So there were a lot of kids in this building that day. It was their Christmas break. The capacity of the theater was 1,300 people. Many estimates say they put close to 2,000 people or more in that building that day. They were actually seating people in the walkways, which you know is a fire code violation right there.
Yeah.
First act of the play goes off just fine. About halfway through the second act, a spotlight above the stage shorts out. And when this spotlight shorts out, it throws a bunch of sparks in an area below it where they stored some things for the sets. There was some paint there, some paint thinners, some costumes, flammable stuff. It ends up igniting that area. Now, initially, even though there was a fire burning in the theater, no one panics. They were actually told not to panic. Even the lead of the play, Eddie Foy, gets up on stage, tells people, yeah, there is a little fire in the theater, but not to worry. The theater's fireproof. The fireproof curtain's going to come down in a couple of minutes. We should be able to contain that fire. We'll get on with the show. Everybody kind of stays calmly in their seats. They were told if they have to evacuate, we're going to do it in a very calm manner. Even Eddie Foy starts singing them a little song. Now, the first sign of panic is as that curtain is coming down, the fireproof curtain, it doesn't make it. It ends up snagging. That's when people start exiting the building. The first to exit are the cast and crew. They go through fire exit doors beyond the stage. When they open those doors, that lets air into the building. When air is introduced to the building,
Firestorm.
Backdraft. It throws fireballs right into the theater, igniting things even more. That's when everybody starts panicking and running for the exits. Now, they were all told there's more fire exit doors in this building than any in the world. But initially, no one could find any of these doors because the owners of the theater didn't bother putting any lighting or marking above the doors. Now, even when people did find the exit doors, they couldn't get out of them very easily because all of the exit doors had been locked with huge deadbolt locks. Up front, up on top in the balcony, people tried to exit the building leading to the fire escapes. They were also told there's more fire escapes in this building than any other theater in the world. But eventually, about 125 or so people ended up falling to their death in the alley back there. That's where we're going to go in a couple minutes. They did not complete the fire escapes. They had like platforms there, but the rest of the stairs and everything leading down were not there yet. They didn't completely put those in. People couldn't get out of the back end. They ran toward the front end to try to get out by that marquee where they came in. But even then, they couldn't get out of there so easily. In the original Iroquois Theater, the doors didn't open that way. They pulled in. So again, in everybody's haste to get out of the building, they were all up against these doors and could not pull them back. The majority of people died right beyond the marquee, right behind the exit doors.
Like
trampled on or from smoke inhalation.
Yeah.
They say by the time the firemen got here, the fire had almost put itself out. And what they were met with was, when they opened those marquee doors, was a very eerie silence with all these dead bodies stacked up in rows. About 603 people died in this fire. It is considered the single deadliest loss of life in one fire in American history. One building fire in